Welcome to the Rivers and Tides podcast, where we have guests on to hear their stories of resilience and healing through their outdoor pursuits. My name is Richard Volpe. I'll be hosting this podcast, and my guest today is Austin Young. And Austin's not just a guest, he's also my partner in this endeavor, and he'll be doing most of the hard work behind the scenes. He's going to be taking care of most of the production and the videography and the photography, so really I think I've got the easy job in this endeavor. But with that, Austin, I'll let you talk a little bit about yourself.
Cool. My name is Austin Young, like you said, and I'm a guide out here in Charleston. I also do videography and photography for a few companies out here. Most of the stuff I'm doing is guiding, but, you know, in my free time, I like to go out and hunt and fish and do all that stuff as well, so it kind of lined up with my career path. You know, recently I met Rich over here at one of our Project Healing Waters, what do we call that, group meetings?
Yeah, the meetings we have every other week.
Yeah, and that's a veteran organization that gets vets kind of, I guess it's more geared towards fly fishing, but in general in the outdoors and pursuing things that make them happy, like rod building, fly tying, and they set trips up to, you recently got set up on a trip going to Roatan, right?
Yeah, I was pretty lucky, got a call saying that they were putting together a trip to Roatan, Honduras to do some bonefish and permit fishing for a week, and yeah, they said they had an open seat and asked me if I'd be interested in going, and that was a pretty easy decision. So
yeah, highly recommend looking into something like that if you're a vet trying to get out there and do some adventurous stuff.
Yep. So Project Healing Waters, great organization. Basically, they get out and get disabled veterans and together and teach them all about fly fishing, rod building, fly tying, and stuff like that. And like Austin said, that's where we met. And, you know, on this podcast, what we want to do is get folks on and you know, hear their stories. Over my time of the last year with volunteering with Project Healing Waters, I got to talk to a lot of people and hear some of their stories and, you know, and hear how that organization and just fly fishing in general had basically saved their life and, you know, helped them really get out of some dark places. So I started thinking about, like, it'd be super compelling to hear some of their stories in like a podcast format and just, you know, hear their backgrounds, hear, you know, where they grew up, hear about their time, like, in the military, how they ended up in the military, and then just basically, like, whatever their outdoor pursuit is, that outdoor love that they have. You know, for me, it's fly fishing. You know, that's kind of what my thing is, but just to hear how that endeavor helped them get through their difficult times.
Yeah, and it definitely has helped me a lot, too. So I was on board the second Rich asked me, and I am pretty thankful to be starting this podcast with him. So we are just kind of introducing ourselves in this first podcast. We kind of want to let you guys know who we are before we start interviewing other people. But we got some great guests lined up. Some are vets, some aren't, but really geared towards making sure that people who have gone through some hard times, you don't have to be a vet, but anybody who's gone through hard times or someone who's just looking for their sense of purpose in life and they enjoy the outdoors, we're going to give a lot of tips and bring guests on who have very good suggestions on how to get into the outdoors and pursue the things that make you happy instead of just, you know, working that 9 to 5 and sucking, you know, or even just getting out after your 9 to 5 that you're not enjoying, but you're kind of stuck in it now. You've gone too long. You know, you're at that point where you're almost hitting retirement, but, you know, we're going to give you the encouragement to stick through it and give you kind of some inspiration on what you can do to get out there and enjoy your time off and try to make the best of it.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the outdoors, you know, fly fishing, you know, talking about fly fishing in particular, I'm not a hunter. I know you are, so maybe I'll let you talk a little bit more about that. But before we dive into that, why don't we do a little bit of background on ourselves? Sure. I grew up on Long Island, and Port Washington, Long Island is where I grew up, and grew up kind of with my friends who had boats, and their parents were into fishing, so I got introduced to fishing in Long Island Sound and Manhasset Bay out there and on Long Island, and did a little bit of conventional fishing back in the day just with my friends out there. But after high school, which was, for me, more of a place to hang out with my friends and make plans to party and where we were going to have the next party at, as opposed to, like, the academic pursuits, which came later when I got out of the Marines. But, you know, I definitely needed out of high school to grow up a little bit and needed some time to get my head out of my ass. So my dad was a Marine, and he had never pushed it on me, but I was always kind of around that mentality of seeing him and the pride that he had in the Marines and stuff like that. So I just, one day said I need to do something. So I went and enlisted. Well, I talked to my dad, and a funny story is that when I went to tell him, I'm like, Dad, I want to enlist in the Marines. And to this, kind of funny, because I don't know if he had no confidence in me or if he was actually looking out for me. But when I went to tell him I wanted to enlist in the Marines, he was like, Rich, you sure you don't want to join the Air Force? Yeah. I mean, no offense to Air Force people. You got a great life. But I don't know if he just didn't think I could hack the Marines, or if
he was trying to look out for you.
Yeah, he was trying to look out for me and say, hey, maybe you want to actually live in a nice place instead of some Quonset hut somewhere. But so I enlisted in the Marines and did 4 years in the Marines and got out. And that's when I went to college. First 2 years, I went out to University of Colorado in Boulder.
Very cool.
That's where I got introduced to fly fishing. We could talk about that more later. And then I transferred to George Washington University. I met my wife when I was out in Colorado, and she moved to D.C. with me from Boulder, which she'll never forgive me for.
Yeah.
And then I graduated from George Washington University and joined the U.S. Department of State with a group called the Diplomatic Security Service, where I did a lot of work overseas and had a great career as a federal law enforcement officer. And I actually retired last March. Being federal law enforcement, we get to retire pretty early, which we're lucky. And now I'm kind of working on my next thing, and this is a big part of it. So I'm pretty excited about this.
Very cool. What kind of fishing were you doing in Long Island?
Just mostly for like bluefish and striped bass inshore. And then one of my best friends, his dad had a boat that they would take out to Montauk in the summer times. And, I was lucky enough to go out a few times with them to go after tuna and shark and things like that, which was really fun. I would love to do that again sometime. But yeah, that was mostly what I did.
And when you got into fly fishing, what was like the first thing that you saw, and what got you into it?
So I started working at a company called Active Endeavors, which was a local company there in Boulder, Colorado. And one of the gentlemen that worked there, he introduced me to fly fishing. He was a huge fly fisherman. I didn't know anything about it. But he introduced me to it. And, basically the first place we went was a small river right outside of Rocky Mountain National Park, I believe it was. And I can't remember exactly which river it was, but, I just remember not knowing what the heck I was doing. Casting seemed impossible. There was no way I was catching fish. But I just remember standing in that river in the middle of like the mountains and just looking around me in awe, just like, it was just having your feet in the river, being surrounded by that beauty. It was just a special thing. And from that moment, I was just hooked. I mean, for me, fishing became more of a bonus, like catching fish. It was just all about like the experience, being out in nature. I loved being out there in the rivers. And, the camaraderie of fly fishing with other fly fishermen is kind of fun. As you know, with fly fishing, you can go down a lot of rabbit holes as far as, tying flies and things of that nature. So all of that's really fun.
With fly tying being so difficult and, same thing with casting, what made you pursue something that was difficult instead of just going with a spin rod and the stuff that you kind of knew already?
I think that even to this day, and on top of fly fishing, when you get into fly tying, and even now I'm tying my own leaders, I think that like it's the accomplishment. Like when you catch a fish, you've worked so much harder to get that fish that it's just, I don't know, that sense of accomplishment. I won't say mastered. I'm not even close to mastering fly casting. I don't know that many people are, unless you're like Flip Pallet or Lefty Cray or somebody like that. Because it's difficult, when it works and it all comes together and you catch a fish, it's just very gratifying.
Oh yeah,
a great feeling. I caught this fish on and then when you do it on a fly that you tied, it just is even better.
Oh yeah. And that's probably my favorite thing about guiding is watching people catch their first redfish or catch their first fish on the fly in general. And you just see like, there's a point where they're kind of going, am I ever going to be able to do this? This is getting really hard.
Yeah.
They get a little disappointed. And then when the puzzle pieces kind of all come together and they see the full picture and they got that fish on the rod, that smile that they get and the excitement, it's like catching your first fish all over again.
And then, what's kind of cool for me is, I lived out west for the last several years, a big portion of my life, last 12 years. And moving here, back to the East Coast, and saltwater fly fishing is a whole new game for me. So it's kind of fun because it's all it's all new again. Different challenges. Certainly the casting is more important, a lot more emphasis on accuracy and distance and casting. So that's been a challenge for me, and trying to get that down and not casting like a trout fisherman anymore, or trying to set the hook like a trout fisherman anymore. But yeah, I mean, last summer, I got with one of our future guests, Rob Alexander. He's down in Beaufort. He's a guide down there, and I got with him and chartered him, and he got me out there on a flood tide in the grass flats, which itself is just like being out in a river out west. It's just gorgeous. I mean, it's just being in that environment is incredible. But then looking for tailing redfish. And that whole experience of I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Like him getting me into my first tailing redfish, then casting to it, and that sight fishing, and then catching the fish that you see. It's like another level. It's
it's hunting and fishing. A lot of people equate it to hunting and fishing because you have to stalk that fish. You have to get up to him silently. You can't rock the boat. You can't put your push pull on an oyster. You got to cast accurately. You usually have one shot. A lot of times it's just you're stalking a fish and you picked your target and you got to make that shot. When I think of it, it's like a traditional bow versus a compound bow, and we've made it a little bit harder. You got to get a little closer and you got to be a little more quiet, and it just makes it more gratifying when you accomplish that goal of catching them on the fly, especially when they're tailing and you can see them presenting themselves, and it's just a lot of fun. But one thing I kind of wanted to get into too was when you were transitioning out of the military and starting your career, did you go through any difficult times that fly fishing or the outdoors kind of helped you, get through?
Yeah, honestly, my time in the Marines was pretty quiet. We did some deployments, but, I was after Desert Storm and before, everything kicked off after 9/11.
Yeah.
It's an interesting story is so I was living in Georgetown in Washington, D.C., going to George Washington University when 9/11 happened. And my wife and I were at home in our apartment in Georgetown, and we could see the smoke from the Pentagon from our apartment. And I actually tried to go back into I wanted to go back in and after that happened and serve. And I was a little older at the time, and I tried to I met with an recruiting officer, and I was thinking about going back in as an officer because I was getting close to getting close to graduating. And I wanted to fly planes. I wanted to fly jets for the Marines or helicopters. And I went through the process, and it's kind of funny because they kicked it back at the end and said, well, I was at an age where I needed an age waiver, and they said, no, you're too old. We don't want, you can't come back. So I was like, okay, which is probably a good thing. I don't know that I would be married today if I would have went back.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So, but yeah, it kind of worked out because then I applied for the position as a federal agent with the Diplomatic Security Service. So my time in the Marines and that transition out wasn't too difficult. More for me, where fishing kind of came into it was, with this Diplomatic Security Service, I was part of first of all, it's that whole mentality of I want to go, and Diplomatic Security Service, they do a lot of stuff in conflict areas overseas and war zones, basically providing increased security for consulates and embassies that are in high threat areas, and for, ambassadors or the Secretary of State or other VIPs where they run protective details overseas. So I spent a lot of time, 4 years of that time was with a specialized tactical group called the Mobile Security Division. And that was kind of a definitely pointy tip of the spear type of unit where we would go out to places like Beirut, Lebanon during the Israel-Hezbollah war back in 2005 and things like that. So, for me, the challenge was when I left the State Department, it got to a point where with my kids, I was spending a lot of time away from my kids and my wife, and there's a lot, you move every 3 years, and with 2 kids, I got to a point in my life where I was like, I need to make a change. I want something more stable. So I transitioned. I left the State Department and I got a job with the U.S. Department of the Interior as a federal law enforcement officer. And that's where the challenge for me was, because I was used to that pointy tip of the spear, being on the go when we first one to volunteer. And it was that downshift of getting away from that, that I kind of struggled with. It took me, when I left, I really wanted to go back because I just couldn't settle. I just couldn't settle myself down. I always I kind of found myself wanting to go again. And like getting back into fly fishing at that point, and, going back to kind of where it started with fly fishing and learning it all over again and getting back into that community, that's where fly fishing kind of kicked in and helped me kind of make that transition and kind of downshift and settle my soul, for lack of a better way of putting it, because there's something inside you that just wants to go, but, and calming that down and settling it down so where I could be a more settled person for my whole family, for myself, and just feel, more at home in my own skin and not feel like I always needed to be doing something. That's where fly fishing really helped me out and getting with people and just kind of settling that inner drive to be doing stuff.
You can get really anxious when you've kind of been on a certain level for so long and it's time to wind down and have family time, and your family's on a different level than you. It can bring your anxiety, up a little bit. We kind of put ourselves on guard a lot because we're taught to be on guard. We're taught to be ready for things. We're taught to have a plan. So we're expecting things to happen that aren't going to happen, and we're making plans for things that aren't going to happen. And when you're with your family's not thinking about that stuff. They're on a different level.
Yep.
Fly fishing can kind of bring you down a little bit and focus you in on a singular task, get your mind at ease for a little bit, long enough to just reset, and be in the mind space that you need to be when you go home, and be ready to deal with the family life instead of combat or conflict,
Yeah, it was it was an interesting transition for me. But I will say that it's better now. But I think that what you hear a lot of people say, military, anyone that's been in that type of environment, is when you ask them what they miss, it's the camaraderie. You miss the camaraderie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's what I really missed that. I missed being on the go, but fly fishing gives you new challenges to kind of replace all that. There's its own, fly fishing has its own camaraderie, as far as hanging out and talking to other fly fishermen. And, you can speak to fly fishing, but I know you're a hunter also. So hunting probably has something similar. And, so that camaraderie within the fly fishing community, that, learning those new challenges of how to cast and catch fish. That definitely was helpful. Big time for me. And it played a big role in, basically who I am today.
Well, I think it's done that for a lot of people, and I've seen it with a lot of vets. I've seen it with a lot of people who've gone through hard times. There is healing in the outdoors, of course, but one of the things that kind of strikes me as something that happens with a lot of people that I've talked to is the different phases in life. The high school phase where you're rambunctious, even getting out of high school and college, you're kind of rambunctious. Finding a need to settle yourself, and the military being kind of one of the outlets for us to get our energy out, be around a bunch of people who are like us, and put you in a lot of situations where you're going to go through the suck. You're going to go through hard times, and you're going to do it with people who are right there with you, and it's going to make it that much better for you as a person to know that this is my standard. I know what I can do in life. I know if things get difficult, I can deal with it. but it also is kind of funny because these different phases in life, it feels like I was a different person in high school. It feels like I was a different person in the military, and it feels like I'm a different person now that I'm raising my family and out of the military. It feels like I've lived a bunch of different lives. You know, this life that I'm living as a guide is probably one of the best. You know, I'm a father, I'm a guide, and I couldn't be more lucky. You know, it's like finding that thing that I needed to do, and in that point of time in my life is invaluable. And I think even when I was young, I needed the military, and that was like, I was very lucky to find the military. I really do hope that my children don't need the military to settle down. I really hope I can give an outlet to my son, who's pretty rambunctious. My youngest is the most rambunctious out of all three of ours, but he's going to need some kind of outlet. It sounds like hockey is going to be his outlet, which would be great. But, you know, we as young men, I think we do have tendencies to be a little bit more rambunctious, a little violent at times, chaotic, and we kind of enjoy that for that period of our lives. But there's a time when we need to settle down, and that transition, for a lot of people, fly fishing can really facilitate that transition, bring that community that we're talking about. And the community is so important because you need people who have gone through it with you. Just like in the military, you need people who are going through that horrible time with you. And otherwise, you're just sitting there doing it by yourself. It can be too overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely.
We need to probably move the boat pretty soon. So,
you know, as you can see, the boat's behind us. That's how we got to this little beautiful island we're out here on this morning. But the tide is going out rather quickly, so I think we should probably maybe take a quick break and push the boat out a little bit before we get stuck here till the tide comes back.
Sure. And when we get back, I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself, and very similar to Rich. But yeah, we're going to take a quick break.
Awesome.
All right, we're back.
All right, well, we're back. We moved the boat, so we're good to go for a little bit longer here. With that, Austin, why don't you tell us a little bit about, you know, where you grew up?
So I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and my father kind of got me into the outdoors, and my mother too. I mean, we did a lot of camping growing up. My dad always had a boat, and I grew up with another family that we would go out together and hit the lakes out there, and we did Lake Powell, Patagonia, Elephant Butte, all those things, and really enjoyed being out there. And man, right off the bat, me and this kid that I grew up with, we would fish for bluegill, you know, right off the dock. It was just, you know, we'd go to the rocks, we'd fish for bluegill all the time. And I just, you know, really started fishing at a really young age and enjoyed it. My dad would take me quail hunting all the time, and we do duck hunts and stuff like that. But, you know, one of the things that I kind of like started to notice was when I got older, slowed down on some of the outdoor stuff. Got into high school and still hunted and fished a little bit, but it slowed down. I was kind of more interested in, you know, skateboarding, girls, and getting in trouble.
Playing school stuff.
Yeah. So I kind of got away from the outdoors for a little bit, but, you know, my high school years were very, very chaotic, I would say. I just really enjoyed chaos and partying and getting into trouble, and it was very hard for me to sit in class for 6 hours. I enjoyed some of the stuff that they were teaching me, and I'd do really good in those subjects, but when it came down to it, after a while, towards the end of the day, I was out of it. I wasn't listening. I was trying to get my energy out. I played rugby after school. We had rugby. I played baseball for a while. But once I found rugby really took over. And rugby was kind of like my introduction into controlled violence. You know what I mean?
Rugby's a tough sport.
It's a tough sport, but it was, I think it was very necessary for me. You know, otherwise I'd probably be getting into fights, you know, because that was something that happened a lot in my middle school years. Like I said, I was skateboarding. I grew up on the southwest side of Tucson, and at the time, skateboarding was very not cool. So this was prior to like the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater video game.
So you
and all
were
that
different.
stuff. I was different, and I was different. And around a lot of other people who like my mother, she's Hispanic, and my father, he's Anglo. So it was like when I was around Mexicans, I was white, and when I was around white people, I was Mexican. It was just like it was just kind of, I didn't fit in quite to any group, and I found that sort of sense of community in the few skaters that I was around, and that was kind of who I was through middle school, through high school, and even through college. I was snowboarding a lot, so it carried over. But what I found was, I kind of knew like who I was, and I wasn't willing to like conform and change who I was, and I felt like the people I was around were very honest with who they were as well, and I appreciated that, and I started to notice that too when I got older. The people who I wanted to hang out with were people who were willing to be themselves no matter what, which is great because there's a lot of fakeness in the world. People will say one thing and do another, or just try to conform themselves to fit into a group that they think is cool. And so I kind of had a little resentment in high school when skateboarding became cool. And I, kind of started to see the fakeness in society, and I wanted to just always pursue a community that was real. So that's kind of something that I found in the military and fly fishing. It kind of carried over. Like, these are people who are pursuing something that they're interested in, and they're going to be who they are, their personality, and they're accepted in the community no matter what, as long as they're just being themselves. And in the military, you're really allowed to be yourself 100%. You can, you could be from two different parts of the world. You can say what you want to say. You can.
Yeah, I think it's one of the unique things about the military that I think benefits people that have been in the military is that you're around people from all walks of life, all over the U.S., all different colors, creeds, beliefs, religions, whatever, and you're all thrown. You talk about, mixing bowl. Mm-hmm. The military is the ultimate mixing bowl, and I think that you learn to, you just learn a lot about different people and how to get along with them, and people skills, and just knocks down a lot of barriers, and as far as like things that you had believed, because you meet people from all over and from different walks of life, and they're the person to your left and your right. So
it feels like probably the most freedom you can have in a society, because you can absolutely be yourself 100% and be accepted. And the only thing that matters are your intentions. Like, are you going to have my back when we need you?
Yeah.
Are you carrying your weight in this community? And everything else is out the window. It doesn't matter who you are.
So I know you served in the Army. So why don't you tell me how you ended up there? How'd you end up in the Army?
So like I said, I played baseball for a while, and one of the kids that I played baseball with, he was really good. He got drafted to the Braves, and he turned down a contract during college for getting drafted to the Braves to go into the military. Wow. And he went 82nd Airborne and went on a deployment in Afghanistan, and he would come back on leave, and we'd hang out and party, and I'd ask him questions. At the time, I kind of had the interest of going into the military. I wasn't doing much. I was working like construction back home, and for my dad under his company. Just felt like I was freeloading. I just needed a sense of purpose and some kind of direction in life, and I felt like I was getting older, and it was time for me to just buckle up and do something that I needed to do, like something important. And I saw what he was doing, and I was very interested. And one of the times he came back pretty close to Christmas, I was like, hey, I've been talking to a recruiter, and I'm thinking about going into, I was talking to the Air Force, the Navy, and none of them wanted me because I had too many tattoos. And he's like, go talk to the Army recruiter. I went right over to the Army recruiter.
They didn't want you because you had too many tattoos?
Correct, yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
They had a tattoo policy for a while, and they might still do, I don't know. But there was a tattoo policy, you couldn't have tattoos below the sleeves, and at the time I did. And he was like, go talk to the Army recruiter, they'll take you. Everybody has tattoos in the Army. And, I even talked to the Marines, and the Marines had some tattoo policy too. Wow. So I went to the Army guy, and he's like, yeah, sure, come on, let's get you set up. And, they tell you anything you want to hear at first.
That's for sure.
We're going to give you a signing bonus, and you can get whatever job you want. But I was already...
Sign right here.
Exactly. I was already kind of trying to get into the fire department, and that was one of the other reasons why I wanted to get out. The fire department where I was at had a really long wait time to get in. It was like 2 years or something, and at the time, 2 years felt like forever.
Yeah.
When you're a young kid, 2 years is just way too long. So, I was talking to my buddy, and I was like, all right, I'll go talk to the Army. And I was kind of on my path to getting into the Army. I was in Future Soldiers Program, I think it was called, or something like that. And my buddy ended up passing away in Afghanistan. And I was just like, oh man, this is real now. Like this isn't just a job. This could be life or death. I saw how it impacted his family. I saw how it impacted all our friends. And my friends were telling me, like, are you really going to do this still? I felt like if I quit then, I was like, man, I'm not going to ever live that down. Like I'll always regret it. And so I continued on that path to joining the military. And the recruiter kind of told me, you already have your EMT. You've been volunteering as a firefighter. Like, you should be a medic. And my one thing was like, well, if I'm a medic, am I going to see combat? Like, I really want to know what that was like. And he's like, yeah, of course. But, of course, he's just telling me what I want, because I could have got stuck in an aid station. I could have been in the hospital working the whole time. But no, he was right. When I joined, I went through all the training programs, went to St. Louis, Missouri, did my basic training there, and then I went to Fort Sam Houston for my advanced training for medics. And then I got stationed in Fort Stewart, Georgia, and that's actually where I met my wife prior to me deploying. But they put me with an infantry unit, and sure enough, I got to go to war. So he wasn't lying about that, but I did get to go to war in Afghanistan in 2013 and see what that was like. It was...
How long were you in Afghanistan for?
So I went to Afghanistan. I was just under... It's like 7 months, 6 or 7 months, because I got injured. We had a 9-month deployment. I got injured and sent back early. I had to have a surgery in Bagram, Afghanistan, and after that, they sent me to Germany for a little bit to heal up. And by the time I was healing up, they said, your unit's going back in a month. It's time to, we're going to send you back. So I got sent back a month early.
Back to the States?
Back to the States. Got back to Georgia probably like a month before everybody else got back. But to me, the training that I did in Fort Stewart prior to deploying, and the people that I met, and the being around infantry, I was a medic for about 35 infantry guys, and I was responsible for a lot of stuff, and I had a lot of weight on my shoulders as a younger.
It's amazing.
Man.
That's another incredible thing about the military. In the Marines, I was a crew chief on Hueys. I flew on helicopters.
Oh, yeah.
So I spent some time out on a carrier, and I would look out during flight operations, and during flight operations you've got the flight deck is just chaos. It's controlled chaos, but they're moving helicopters around, they're moving Harriers around, and it's all a bunch of 21-year-old kids.
Yeah, or younger, sometimes younger, 18.
Just a bunch of kids, and you have so much responsibility so at such a young age, and I think that's another thing you benefit from long term.
Yes, but also when you get out, it's almost one of the things that make us kind of suffer when we get out. We've had all that responsibility, and now you're trying to get a job, and you go to Lowe's and they're turning you down because they're afraid you're that crazy combat veteran, and they're like, "Are you sure you can handle a cash register?" It's like, yes, I've been responsible for millions of dollars of equipment, of people's lives, and countless, like life or death situations. It's unbelievable that we struggle so bad when we get out. And one of the things prior to me going in, I thought this was going to be my college education. This was going to be my degree. This was going to be my foot in the door for a lot of jobs. And when I got out, I found out that wasn't the case.
Yeah. It'd be a difficult transition.
It's very difficult, because I was trying to apply to like all these companies I wanted to work for. And when they started turning me down, I started going lower and lower and lower till eventually I was like trying to apply to like Home Depot and stuff like that and still not getting jobs and like wondering like my sense of worth, you know, like I'm not providing for my family like I thought I could. I'm not that level that I thought I would be at my age. And I was going back to college and still not fitting in college. Now I was the older guy in college because I spent 4 years in the military, and now I just didn't fit into the younger 18, 19-year-olds that were there. And I felt like, am I doing the right thing? Did I do the right thing? You know, for a while it was just, I had this anxiety of like I was saying, all the people I fit in with and I could be myself 100%. Now I couldn't be myself. You know, now I was being muted. I was being told, you know, oh, you can't say that and you can't act that way. And it's like, well, who says? Like, I'm still a good person. You know what I mean? I'm trying, my intentions are to make you laugh or to have a good time or to, you know, be here, do my job and find where I fit in this area. But you know, in the military, it's just so cut and dry.
Well, I think that's another big thing that I think people that makes it difficult. I mean, you know, for me, it was somewhat in the military, but also a lot more with my deployments when I was with the Mobile Security Division with the State Department. Or anytime you go overseas in that environment, life is things get boiled down to what's important and what's not.
Yeah.
You know, you go out, you do what you do every day, you do your mission. Things are very black and white. You're not worried about you're not worried about all the, you know, for lack of a better term, all the bullshit that goes on at home and all the stuff that's going on.
Taxes,
you're just streets. You just go and do your job, and it's very simple in a lot of ways, and I think it's something that I know I would struggle with is that I kind of longed to get back to that.
Oh, I did. I tried getting back in at some times.
Yeah, because you know you get back and you're surrounded by all this new bullshit, like stuff around the house and like you said, like bills and all this other crap, and
it seems overwhelming.
It is.
It's nothing like crazy when you really think about it. It just feels so overwhelming because there's so many little things that add up.
Yeah, and you're just like, there is this, all of a sudden you're finding yourself sitting there going, man, I want to go back.
Yeah,
like things are so much simpler.
Yeah,
back there, over there, you know.
And with the people who are like that you went through, you know, that's kind of why I didn't end up going back into the military. I said, you know, the people I deployed with were like just an exceptional group of people, and I was around top-notch leadership. I was around from the bottom up, you know, the privates to the officers. You know, everybody was just top-notch, and I wasn't going to find that in another unit. I wasn't going to find that in the Guard or anything like that, and I knew I was like, you know, I got to find my community. And that's kind of how I got into fly fishing, was searching for my community. My body was beat up at the time in the military. I couldn't skateboard or snowboard anymore. Like I thought I would be snowboarding on a mountain when I got out of the military. That was like my thought in my head. And, you know, my back at that point was just destroyed from carrying the weight on the deployment and all that stuff and rucking and all that. So I had to find my sense of purpose, find my community, and somehow I kind of, you know, I moved my family back to Fort Collins, Colorado when I got out of the military. And
beautiful place.
Very beautiful, kind of, you know, very similar to Boulder.
Yeah.
But yes, I was in the mountains, and I remember my dad had a fly reel and fly rod, and I said, you know, like, I'm going to try that, you know. I seen the people on the streams doing that. I'm going to try that. And I found just a huge welcoming presence from that community. The second I really wanted to like get into it and I started showing interest, I was going pretty often, and I was meeting people all the time. And one of the guys I met was this old dude who's like, I've owned fly shops in the Keys and fly shops here, and smoking a cigar. And me and him are both like fishing a little tiny creek in the middle of the city, just an urban creek, nothing up in the canyon or anything like that. But he came over to me and he's like, you know, you're starting to figure out the cast. Let me give you a couple flies that will help you. They're eating something smaller. And he like tied something on real tiny, and he's like, cast that a couple times. And like, sure enough, like first or second cast, I catch a tiny little rainbow. And, you know, I was like, you know, this is maybe like my third fish at the time. And he's like, that's it. Come on, let's go to my truck. I'm going to give you a bunch of flies. And it was just super welcoming. And I was like, you know, like, this is what I was looking for. He didn't care who I was. He didn't care my level. He didn't care about anything, you know, and I needed that kind of engagement and that kind of you know, like non-biased, just welcoming feeling. And so I just immediately was drawn to fly fishing, and I put up my spin gear, and I had a buddy that we'd fish with all the time. He would still toss his spin gear, and I would just only bring a fly rod, and we started getting into them. I started getting better, and you know, before I knew it, I was casting great, catching fish all the time, and just pursuing different areas and getting more and more into fly fishing.
I don't think I've ever said I cast great, so you're ahead of me.
Well, you know, and I say that relevant because I thought I was casting great and I probably was doing pretty good for trout, but when I got to saltwater, I was very humbled very quickly.
It's a different game.
It's a different game, and I had very awesome buddies who were like, again, you know, comfortable enough to tell me, "Hey, dude, you cast like shit."
Yeah,
you know,
it's, and you know, you're right. You only get one shot sometimes, so you kind of got to. I'm still working on it, but so would you say like that entry into fly fishing there? How would you say like that got you on the path of like we were talking about earlier about calming that soul and kind of calming that inner desire to like get back over there? Just like, was it just that introduction and then finding a different passion?
Yeah, you know, it was. I think for me, it was a slower process. I didn't like immediately recognize that, oh, fly fishing is going to save me. You know, like this is what I needed. I was on a pretty bad path when I was getting out of the military. I had a lot of I feel like it's separation anxiety. You know, misdiagnosis PTSD. A lot of the times they want to say it's PTSD. I felt very comfortable with the things I saw. I felt very trained for everything I dealt with. I don't have, you know, crazy thoughts of the things that I dealt with. That stuff to me is very settled, very normal, and I was prepared for that. But what I wasn't prepared for was the shock of, you know, separating from those people I felt had my back, life or death, I was very comfortable with. I had, you know, just the most accepting group of people, and some of the best people you could ever meet I met in the military. And
that transition back,
that separation from them and going into the civilian world and finding that even like some of my family didn't understand what I went through, but these guys did, you know what I mean? And that could be hard because, you know, your wife goes through a whole nother set of circumstances than you do. And it could be just as, you know, not traumatic. It's just as hard of adjustment for her as it is for you. When you come back, because, you know, when you're deployed, she's head of the household. She's taking care of everything. She's having to do a lot of things for the kids, for the family, for making sure that things are ready for you when you come back. And when you come back, you've dealt with a bunch of different things that you're not used to dealing with, and it's kind of overwhelming. And you're not for me, I wasn't the same person.
Well, you both need the transition, right? Because like when I was with the State Department, we would deploy for 45 to 60 days at a time, but we would also be gone a lot for training. And I would get home, and, you know, when I first started doing that and been away, you know, I'd get back and, you know, maybe furniture had been moved or things were different or things had been changed, and I would be like, you know, why is this way? And why are you doing this with the kids? And I had to learn pretty quickly to check myself with that, because she's been there, like you said, dealing with all that shit. And, you know, the last thing she needed from me was to come home with my attitude of, like, why are you doing things this way?
And why, and you know, looking back, it's like, why did we even have attitudes like that, you know? But it's just kind of, you know, it's a hard adjustment for both of you. And it can be even harder when you lose your spouse. And I saw, you know, some of my friends lose their spouse. And then, you know, even worse, just lose that fight to continue. You know, I've dealt with a lot of friends committing suicide after the military, you know, and that to me is even harder to deal with than the whole deployment itself.
Yeah,
it's like rated through the deployment. Why are we, you know? But we slip into that darkness.
It's the stuff we talked about. It's the after.
It's the after.
It's the after. It's the transition. It's the relating to your new environment. You know, and it's just simple things like you come back from a deployment, you've been in an environment where, people are getting shot at, and it's chaos, and like you said, it's that that wartime type environment, or that conflict zone you've been in, and you get back, and you hear, like, you're out, even if you're out at a store or you're invited to a barbecue, and you hear things, what people are talking about, and you're just like, I cannot relate to these people. Like, absolutely. I just want to get the fuck out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that alone, I mean, that isolates you and makes you feel
alone, and you're not with the people that you were with.
Yeah, but who get it, who understand.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about that transition. I got to move the boat just a little bit, and we'll restart and talk a little bit more about that transition, because I think it's kind of important to for people to kind of understand. There's that dark time sometimes for anybody, not even just vets, but there's a way out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, we move the boat back out again. We're safe again for another 30 minutes or so. But, we were talking about that transition, and so I'll let you, Austin, talk a little bit more about that transition.
I think when it comes down to transitioning out of the military, transitioning out of that high-paced environment, like you were talking about, there's just a lot of things going on. It's not just the things you saw or the people you're with, but it's also the way you operated for so long. And a lot of the times for us, it's during like the most influential periods in our lives as young men, growing up, and it's really imprinted on our brains. Like, this is how you survive. This is what gets you through these times and stuff like that. And for me, it was like, it's as simple as, like, if you stub your toe, you got to get angry and get through it. You know what I mean? The anger was something that helped me get through a lot of things. If someone was shooting at me, you get angry, and you're just not feeling like, coward, and being a coward, and being behind, being too scared to operate. That anger was something that got me through most of the difficult times in my life in the military. So when I got out, that wasn't beneficial. When you get in an argument with your wife and you get too angry, that
doesn't usually end up well.
Doesn't end up well. So relearning how to deal with conflict with your family members, dealing with family life in general, and civilian life, driving your car and not getting so angry. That was it still kind of is for me, one of my biggest points of contention, or just agitation. It's like driving my car and just getting cut off by someone, because in the military, if someone cuts you off in a convoy, it's usually threatening your life in some way, and you can deal with it with escalation of force. But in the civilian world, it's not like they're threatening your life. It's just some bonehead driving his car. You know what I mean? So,
but there's that seed that's been planted in you that gives you that immediate, subconscious,
like a light switch almost. And I felt that.
React,
I felt that way, like a light switch. And then you go and try to explain that to the counselor you're seeing. You're like, feels like I got a light switch and I get angry too easy. And they're like, you're bipolar. It's like, no, I'm just telling you, like, this medication you're giving me makes me feel bipolar. No, you're probably bipolar.
That's the other thing is, like, as far as the outdoors being healing, it's, quite frankly, their answer is write a prescription.
Exactly.
And they just, because it's quick and easy and square peg, square hole, and
yeah, there's an algorithm.
Yeah. So that's not good.
And there's no real algorithm to fly fishing, hunting, or anything in the outdoor pursuit. It's very personal. It's almost like, religion's so personal. Your relationship with a God or the outdoors is going to be so personal and unique to you that you can't almost explain perfectly what it means to you or how it benefits you and stuff. But the truth is, it does benefit you. The outdoors has benefited me so much by bringing me that sense of community, me being able to absolutely pursue something that I enjoy, that I can be myself in this realm. I don't have to worry about, just trying to fit in. Like, this is what I'm interested in.
And you are fitting. You're fitting in with that community, which is is huge. I mean, and just being outside, being in nature is healing.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that we're talking about is anecdotal from our own experience and people that we talk to that, just will say, being out in nature has helped heal me, and it's a healing experience. But I mean, now that they're really doing a lot of scientific studies that back that up, that being in nature is very healing. In fact, in Japan, doctors write prescriptions for people that are stressed to, I forget what the term is, but basically to go out and spend time in nature, and because they understand how healing it is.
It doesn't matter who you are. I've heard it like that crystal ball woo-woo stuff where it's like, put your feet on the ground and be connected to the earth. Man, it's above all that. It's just about smelling fresh air, getting out of that urban environment sometimes, because this is the real world. This is reality. Things happen, and storms, calm waters, everything is out of your control, and you have to deal with it all. And it doesn't matter, like, there's no like anger in the storm. You know what I mean? Like the storm doesn't have some kind of vengeance against you. This is just the way it is, and you can deal with it, and you can be happy, you can enjoy everything for what it is. But the urban environment is chaotic. There's people who are frustrated. There's anger. There's disorientation from being in a big city, from not being around, like not being able to see the sun, not being able to see like the mountains or the trees and stuff like that. It's disorienting, and then humans have evolved to deal with this stuff, being outside, seeing the birds react, seeing
hunter-gatherers, man.
Yes, it's in our DNA. It's like the reason why you feel good about sitting next to a campfire is because we've done it so long.
Yeah.
It's the same thing about owning a dog. That relationship you have with a dog, we've done it for so long. These things just feel natural to us, and the outdoors is natural. You don't have to worry about people's intentions and stuff like that. This is just how it is.
I had my son has ADHD, and when he was littler, he has a pretty severe ADHD, whatever you want to say, whether people believe in ADHD or not. But one of the therapists he was seeing one time really put it well, in that she said, back when there was no ADHD back in the day, because, even when kids would go to school, they'd come home and they'd work outside for 5-6 hours, farming or whatever they did. And then they were too damn tired to have ADHD, so it's, staying busy. And I will say, like, as far as being in nature, I mean, I can't count the number of times, where I've been sitting there, standing in the middle of a gin clear river out west, and I'll just stop and look around me and just be like, holy, like even this morning coming out with, the sun coming up, beautiful sunrise. All of that is it's just healing.
Yeah. And I don't take none of that for granted. I thought, after I've only been guiding for about 4.5 years now. And I thought at some point I'd be like, when is this going to just feel normal? This always feels amazing.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It's some people go to church to get God, but man, I go to the outdoors to get God because I see it in everything.
Man, I had just pulling up to the dock this morning, I was right behind you, and when I came around we came around towards the ramp and I saw that sunrise coming over the marsh, I had to stop and take a picture, because just take a second to enjoy it. Mm-hmm. I mean, just stopping. And I think that's the other thing about being in the outdoors. You learn to just stop.
Yeah.
Just stop and look around and be in the moment.
That's so beneficial to that transition of the go to just like take a second and enjoy where you're at. You're not getting shot at. You're not, you don't have an enemy threat. You don't have anything to do right now besides enjoying where you're at. Take a breath, enjoy these fish tailing in front of you, enjoy these birds that are flying around, and appreciate what you have. Like it was kind of hard to understand how fortunate I was getting out of the military and all the things that I benefited from while in the military, when I was just getting out, and sometimes to be able to clear your mind while you're casting and to only focus on your casting gives you that second to slow down enough to, when you're done and you're just like, whether you caught the fish or not, you're just like, man, I'm so lucky I got to experience that and everything.
I think fly fishing and hunting, especially like things like bow hunting, if, you were comparing that to fly fishing, I think people like us with our mentality and people have that kind of been through the military, we like to be challenged.
Yeah.
And fly fishing and bow hunting, I would assume, they all present challenges, a lot of challenges that you have to learn how to overcome.
Yeah.
And in its own way, that also is engaging and healing.
For sure.
It gives you that new set of challenges, just like I'm learning to saltwater fly fish. I enjoy like the whole new challenge of it.
We need to be humbled.
Yeah.
And that's what I think the military did for me, is it humbled me. It put me in my place, but it also showed me what I was capable of doing. And what that means is like, something might seem very hard and daunting, but if you don't try and keep going, even when you fail, you're just going to be settling for mediocre your whole life.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to understand, like, no, when things get hard, I can push through, when things get hard, I can learn, I can adapt, and I can overcome.
Yeah. And you definitely get, I find especially with saltwater fly fishing and being out here, there's all kinds of new challenges. You're always being faced with a new challenge, whether it's the wind or the different weather issues.
Sure.
Or
being in a tight creek with the low tide and grass like above your head. And yeah.
I will say that that trout cast comes into play there, because learning how to
come over your head
helps out.
I had a lot of troubles coming from the trout world going to saltwater, but there are a lot of things and a lot of things that we'll talk about on this podcast. My experiences. When I'm talking about something with this fly fishing stuff, my experiences are mainly Charleston, So a lot of the stuff I'm talking about when I'm talking about these reds doing certain things, or what I've noticed, or how I learned to cast, or what I'm capable of doing, this is all kind of relative to my area too, So there's a lot of things that won't apply to Texas, to Louisiana, to Florida, and the challenges we have here might not even apply to some of that stuff. So. But it's also like, I've found my sense of peace in the Lowcountry.
I love it.
I'm very lucky to be here. I thought Colorado and Arizona and the West was going to be where I raised my family. I was very wrong. And I'm very lucky to be here. And this is, there's a lot of things that took over the things that I used to do, like quail hunting and elk hunting, deer hunting, all that stuff kind of turned into something else out here. Like I have marsh hen that I'm able to hunt, and holy cow, look at that guy pushing up that wake. That's DNR too. Jeez, about to get waked out real hard, man. But no, everything that I thought I was losing out in Colorado, I've gained something else out here.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I thought I would live out west forever, but I started to get that pull to come back to the coast, and I am in love with the Lowcountry.
Me too.
It's just a different level of just gorgeous and what it has to offer. And, we were talking about like experiences. Oh, look at that wake. That kicked up. The other day, I'm a new boat owner. That's the one barrier I would think of the salt water.
Oh yeah, it was huge. The tides,
but also if you don't have access to a boat or you don't have a boat, it can be a little bit challenging. There are places to where you can wet wade and go red fishing here, but it's a little challenging, but and a little intimidating, quite frankly. I'm used to fishing out west in gin clear creeks, and here you're stepping into this marsh, and I'm like, what critters are going to attack me when I step out here? So,
or even where to find these fish, when it's so murky like this. Like Florida has clear water, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and the tide's so different. Here. There's a lot of different challenges here. But, I have a boat now, and when I was out the other week and we had that flood tide, I was pulling along with the sun behind me, and all of a sudden, I could see 100 feet plus out sun reflecting off the tails of the redfish.
Oh man, I love it.
That gives me goosebumps just talking about it. But I mean, it's like religious, man.
Yeah,
it's like
it's a really it's like I call that Lowcountry stained glass. I mean, the way that reflects and the way it shines through their tails and the movements. It's almost like they're dancing for you. It's almost like it really feels like this moment is specifically. This might seem arrogant, but it feels like when you're in that moment, it's like this was made for me. Like this whole universe came together to like give me this experience right now.
It's incredible. I mean, seeing the reflection of the sun off their tails that far out was
so great,
incredible.
And everything about the Lowcountry, there's a lot of beautiful things, but you can find this wherever you're at. Honestly, I also feel like if I stayed in Colorado or New Mexico or Arizona, wherever. I would have found that same experience, and I hope I would have found that same experience. But, sometimes it takes going through hard times to, put your head down and get through it and find what makes you happy and pursue it.
Yeah, before I do want you to talk briefly, if you would, about because we're not going to just talk about fly fishing on this podcast. I know you hunt, and I guess if you could just talk a little bit about how hunting has played that same role as fly fishing. I mean, would you say that it's for the same reasons, how they equate as far as, giving you the same types of feelings?
It's very similar. I mean, the places you're hunting in, the experiences you're having with these animals, it reminds you that, humans seem kind of unnatural, but honestly, we are nature. We are part of nature. We are animals, and it kind of brings you back to the experience of maybe your ancestors, or just clicking to that whole feeling of like, this is right. This is what I was made to do. And I know personally, I benefit so much from being outdoors, and this is probably what my ancestors were doing for a long period of time. Something in my DNA makes me just, this is it. So hunting, it's the same feeling I get when I'm sitting next to a campfire. It's the same thing I'm doing when I'm camping. It's the same thing I feel when I go on a long walk or a hike or something. It feels right to me, and I love being able to provide food for my family. I love the experience of shooting an animal and bringing it to the plate, and just the whole process of like, I've worked really hard to do something that isn't very easy, and I've learned a lot, and these things have kind of connected to allow me to be where I'm at and do what I'm doing and make this all happen. And then when you bring it home, and you're kind of, one thing I really like is when we're plucking feathers from the ducks, and my kids are sitting around asking me like, oh, how'd you get this one, and what kind of duck is it, and you're introducing your kids into it. And then when you bring them out and they're experiencing it too, and they might not get it now, but the same thing with me. I kind of fell out of it for a while, but I was introduced at a young age, and when I fell out of it, my kids might do the same thing. They got something to remember, and if they ever need to go back to it, or if they feel the desire to go back to it, that's going to be on the plate for them. It's not going to be a barrier to entry where they have to learn everything all over again, or kind of be reintroduced to it. This is going to be on the plate for them, and I hope it's something that they can think of as far as like it's like an alternative medication almost.
Would you choose? It's interesting. I know a lot of fly fishermen that also hunt, and I've heard quite a few of them say, if they had to choose between the two, they'd pick hunting. Would you pick one or the other if you had to choose?
I've never heard that question. Oh man, that's very hard because I do both for a living. I offer hunting trips as well. We do a lot of marsh hen hunts. We do a lot of duck hunts.
Turkey too?
We offer a few a year. Not too many, so I don't advertise it too much. But we do maybe like 4 a year.
So you can't choose. You gotta choose.
But like it almost goes so hand in hand that it's unfair to have to choose.
Yeah, I hear you. It's just interesting. I have heard some pretty well-known fly fishermen
say they'd hunt.
Say if they had to choose, they would prefer to hunt.
I would have to think about it more because like the benefits of both, you can bring food to the table if you ever needed to. I choose to catch and release all the fish that I'm catching,
which is important for our fishery.
For our fishery, because like not all of our fish are doing that sight fishing stuff that we're looking for. They're not all going in the grass and tailing. They're not all sitting in the back creeks at low tide. We have a slot limit, so meaning that we have a minimum size and a maximum size of fish that you can keep. You can't go over or under. And
yeah, I'm glad to see like the whole catch and release thing. That's been the standard out west forever. And
for a lot of fly fishermen in general.
Yeah, in general, it's good to see that it is starting to gain traction.
Sure.
In the saltwater because fisheries are under.
It is definitely gaining a lot of traction, and it might be from pressure of like people seeing actually the ramifications of keeping fish, and especially for guides. I can't speak for every area and every guide, but I'll tell you what I've seen in my area and what I'm doing. If I were to take my clients every day to the same exact spots and take fish from those same spots every single day, I wouldn't have spots anymore. Yeah. Those fish are habitual.
They get smart, and they get smart.
They get smart, but also like if I were to take, if there's a school of 20 fish sitting on a dock every single day, and I were to take my clients out and they each got 2 every single day, those fish can be gone in a week. You know what I mean? And whether they're gonna we eat them all and take them, or whether they move out, the pressure will move fish in our area. So I do feel like catch and release is a big deal for us because a lot of times we're catching the same fish that we've released, maybe a month prior.
I haven't caught a tagged fish yet, but I've seen a lot of people that catch tagged fish on a regular basis.
And with redfish, sometimes those spots are unique, and you can look back in your photos and be like, man, I've caught that fish before.
Before we wrap up, anything else you want to add?
No, I just I'm very happy that we're doing something that's might have some kind of benefit to other people. I know that it's benefited me a lot being in the outdoors. It's benefited you and all the people that we've met through some of the programs that we've done. A lot of people that hop on my boat, I hear the same story through them, whether they be veterans or just people who've gone through some hard times, fly fishing, hunting, the outdoors in general. It's got its healing properties, and that's kind of what we're going to introduce everybody to. And if we're not introducing you to, we're just going to give you guys some tips on how to keep pursuing it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting folks on and hearing their stories and just how the outdoors and being outside has just, healed them and gotten them through all the difficult times that they've had. So with that, it's been a great first episode of the podcast, and I think we'll call it a day there.
Yeah,
hop back on the boat and head back in.
We got to push that boat out again, but we got some great guests lined up, so stay tuned, and we look forward to seeing you all later.
All right, thanks.